The house was too quiet when Amina got back. No faint music from Jae-min's room, no footsteps, no indistinct voices in the distance, just the echo of her own heartbeat. She dropped her bag on the hallway bench and stood still for a moment, waiting, hoping to hear him come in behind her. He didn't. The silence pressed against her skin. She made tea she didn't want and sat at the kitchen island, watching the clock crawl past midnight. The housekeeper had left hours ago, and every shadow seemed longer than it should be. He said don't follow him. That should have made it easy. She wasn't supposed to care, but her mind wouldn't stop replaying the image of the man in the black suit, the way Jaemin's whole body had changed the instant he appeared. She'd seen him tired, irritated, guarded, but that was different. That was fear wearing discipline like armor. When her phone buzzed, she jumped. It was a message from Daniel. "Hey, just making sure you got home safe. You vanished after the showcase." She started to type, "I'm fine," then erased it. How do you say, "I think my housemate might be into something dangerous, but I'm not supposed to ask," without sounding insane? She settled for, "Yeah, just tired, thanks." She stared at the message until it blurred. The idea of talking to someone, anyone, about what she was starting to suspect scared her more than keeping it to herself. Because what if she was wrong? What if this was just her reading too much into his moods, her own loneliness magnifying every look? But then she remembered his voice from earlier. Go home. Not harsh, protective, like a command wrapped in worry. It would be easier if he were just cruel. By the time she went upstairs, it was almost 2. She hesitated outside his door. No light under the crack, no sound. She lifted her hand to knock, then let it fall. Instead, she whispered through the wood, barely loud enough for the air to carry. "I don't know what you're doing, Jae-min, but come back safe." She turned and went to her room. Sleep didn't come easily. Every car that passed outside made her heart jump. Every creak in the house made her wonder if he was back. At dawn, exhaustion finally won. She dreamed of him, standing at the foot of her bed, shadows moving like smoke around his shoulders. His expression illegible, but his eyes fixed on her as if he was trying to remember something he wasn't supposed to feel. When she woke, her window was open. The curtains moved gently in the morning wind, and on her desk was a single note in precise handwriting. You shouldn't wait up. No name, no signature, but the ink was still fresh. She pressed the paper to her chest, unsure whether to feel comforted or terrified. The following day at school, Amina moved through the halls like a ghost. Her classmates laughed, argued, swapped notes. Everything looked the same, but it all felt off. Jae-min wasn't in class. His seat stayed empty, his notebook gone. When the professor asked if anyone knew where he was, the room went still. Someone finally muttered, "Family business," and the professor just nodded, as if that explained everything. Family business. Those words lodged in her mind like a splinter. At lunch, she sat with Daniel again, partly because he was kind, partly because she needed normal conversation to drown the noise in her head. He told a story about getting lost on the metro, making her laugh for the first time that day. But halfway through, she caught sight of 2 men at the far end of the cafeteria. Dark suits, no trays, no smiles. They weren't watching her exactly, but their gaze swept over the room and lingered on her table for a second too long. Daniel didn't notice. She forced herself to keep smiling, though her stomach turned cold. After class, she went to the library, hoping the quiet would settle her. It didn't. Her phone stayed stubbornly silent. No word from Jae-min, no sign of him at home either. By evening, she couldn't take the not knowing anymore. She found Mrs. Lee, the housekeeper, tidying the main hallway. "Has Jae-min been home?" Amina asked. Mrs. Lee froze mid-motion. He had to travel, for his father. Travel where? The woman's eyes flicked toward the staircase, then back. "You should not ask about those things, Miss Clarke. It is safer." Safer. The word landed like a door shutting. When she was alone again, Amina stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring up at the dark corridor that led to his room. Don't ask. But her feet were already moving. His door opened easily. Inside, the room was as immaculate as always. Everything folded, aligned, nothing personal. Except for one thing, a small silver pendant resting on the desk, shaped like a dragon curling around a black stone. She touched it, and the metal was still warm, as if it had been held not long ago. For reasons she couldn't name, she slipped it into her pocket. Back in her own room, she couldn't focus on anything else. She replayed every moment between them, the look in his eyes when he told her not to follow, the way his voice softened when he said she reminded him of normalcy. What are you hiding from, Jamon? Or who? Her breath buzzed at last. One new message. No name. Just another number she didn't recognize. Stop looking. Her breath caught. The message deleted itself a second later. She sat frozen, heart hammering, until the screen went dark again. Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, beating against the windows like warning knocks. She didn't sleep. Every time the house creaked, she thought it was him. Every passing car sent her heart racing. By dawn, she was sitting on the edge of her bed, the silver dragon pendant in her hand, thumb tracing its cold curve. When the front gate finally opened hours later, she heard it, the low rumble of an engine, doors closing, and then silence. She went downstairs barefoot, her pulse thrumming so loud it drowned everything else. Jae-min was in the foyer. Dark suit, shirt collar open, a faint line of blood on his sleeve he hadn't noticed or hadn't cared to clean. He looked up when she appeared, and for a second he seemed surprised. Then his face settled into that familiar calm. "You're awake. You were gone for 2 days. I told you not to wait. You didn't tell me anything." Her voice shook before she could stop it. "You just disappeared, and now you're, what, pretending that's normal?" He sighed and set down his briefcase. "It's better if you don't know where I go." Better for who? His silence was an answer she didn't want. Amina crossed her arms, trying to hide how scared she was. "Did you text me last night?" That made him look up sharply. "No." What did it say? Stop looking. Then it deleted itself. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. His jaw clenched. "Show me." "I can't. It's gone." He muttered something in Korean under his breath, sharp, low. Then he looked at me again, voice quieter now. "Amina, did you go into my room?" "Why would you?" "Because the message means someone saw you doing something you shouldn't have." His tone wasn't accusing exactly. It was fear disguised as control. She hesitated, then nodded once. "I just wanted to know if you were okay." He closed his eyes briefly. You shouldn't have done that. Then maybe you shouldn't make people worry. The words hung there, raw and trembling. Something broke in his expression, just a flicker, but it was enough. I didn't mean for you to be part of this, he said softly. You were supposed to be safe here. Safe? She let out a short, disbelieving laugh. In this house? With whatever you are? He took a step toward her, slow, measured. You don't want the truth. Try me. Another long pause. Rain hit the windows again, harder this time, as if echoing her pulse. Then, finally, he said, My family doesn't just run businesses. We protect them, control them. You mean... Don't say the word. His eyes locked on hers, warning and plea all at once. Not here. Amina swallowed, throat tight. So all of this, the cars, the men in suits, isn't your world, he finished. And I want to keep it that way. Her voice dropped. Even if it means lying to me? Yes. It should have made her angry. Instead, it just hurt. She turned away before he could see her eyes. You can't protect me by shutting me out, Jae-min. That's not protection. That's punishment. He didn't move as she walked past him toward the stairs. But when she reached the landing, his voice followed. Low, rough, barely steady. I never meant to hurt you. She didn't look back, then stop. Upstairs, her hands trembled as she shut her door. Outside, the rain kept falling, relentless and unending. The weekend passed like a blur. Amina told herself to study, to clean, to pretend that life could be normal again. But the house felt different now. Its quiet, less peaceful, more watched. Every time she glanced out a window, she saw movements that vanished too quickly. A car parked longer than it should, a man with a phone standing at the corner. It could have been coincidence, it could have been nothing, but it didn't feel like nothing. On Monday morning, she left early for class. The air was cold enough to sting. She wrapped her coat tighter and turned onto the main road. And that's when a black sedan eased away from the curb, matching her pace. Amina's pulse jumped. She walked faster. The car didn't pass her. When she finally reached the campus gate, it accelerated and disappeared down the next street. By the time she reached her classroom, she was shaking. She half expected Jae-min to be there, waiting, but his seat was still empty. Instead, Daniel spotted her and frowned. You okay? You look like you ran here. I'm fine. It was automatic, but her voice betrayed her. He leaned in. Did something happen? Amina hesitated, then forced a small smile. Just a weird morning. Before he could ask more, a message flashed on her phone. A private number again. Don't talk to him. Her hands went cold. She looked up instinctively, scanning the lecture hall. No one seemed out of place. The professor started talking, but she couldn't focus. Every shadow felt heavy, every whisper sharp. After class, Daniel offered to walk her home. She refused. The last thing she needed was anyone else tangled in whatever this was. By the time she reached the Kang estate, the sky was already dim. The front gate opened automatically, but this time, 2 men in suits stood inside. Not the usual drivers or guards. Different. Harder. One of them stepped forward. Miss Clarke, he said politely, bowing slightly. Mr. Kang would like a word. She froze. Which Mr. Kang? His father. Her stomach dropped. Before she could speak, another car pulled up the drive. Jae-min's. He got out fast, eyes locking on the men. His voice, when it came, was low and dangerous. She's not involved. Your father disagrees, one replied. The tension was a living thing between them. Amina stepped back, confused. What's going on? Jae-min didn't look at her. Go inside. No, not until someone explains why. Now, Amina. His voice cut through the air, all softness gone. It wasn't anger at her. It was fear disguised as command. She hesitated, then did as he said. From the window upstairs, she watched him argue quietly with the men. His posture was perfect, his face indecipherable, but even from a distance, she saw the flicker of something desperate. A minute later, one of the men handed him a phone. Jae-min listened, said a few words, then threw the phone hard enough that it shattered against the car door. She flinched at the sound. When he finally came inside, he looked different. The calm was still there, but it was stretched thin. They're watching you now, he said quietly. Who? My father's people. They think you've been asking questions. Her breath caught. I haven't told anyone. I know. But it doesn't matter. You're somehow part of this now. The room tilted around her. So what happens next? His answer was soft, final. I make sure they don't touch you, whatever it costs. The office smelled of polished wood and faint smoke, the kind that clung to expensive leather chairs. Jae-min sat behind the long mahogany desk, hands steepled, eyes fixed on the city lights below. A single thought kept circling in his mind. They think she's involved. Every instinct screamed at him to pull back, to erase her from this life before she could be hurt. But the thought of doing it, of telling her to leave, to run, was unbearable. He remembered her face that morning, eyes wide and trembling, hand clutching the silver dragon pendant. She hadn't understood anything, yet somehow she had seen enough to make her feel the danger. And she still came back. The phone buzzed on the desk. He ignored it. A message from his father. The girl is a liability. Handle it. Jaemin's jaw tightened. Liability. Not a person. Not a girl. A problem. He stood and walked to the window, watching Seoul stretch endlessly beneath him. He could see the faint movement of the black cars that shadowed the streets below, his father's eyes, his family's reach. Every corner of the city had eyes, ears, and now she was part of it, part of him. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. For weeks he had kept her at arm's length, cold, distant, controlled. He told himself it was protection. But every time she laughed, every time she looked at him like she could see past him, the control slipped a little. I can't lose her. But the other side of him, the part that had been trained to obey, to act, to eliminate threats, took over the moment his father's men had confronted her. He had to be cold, precise, untouchable. One wrong word, one flicker of doubt, and she could have been hurt. The night was thick with tension. Rain had stopped, leaving streets slick and reflective under the dim glow of street lamps. The city seemed quieter somehow, as if holding its breath, mirroring the storm inside the Kang estate. She barely noticed him in the hall until a shadow moved. "Jae-min," she called softly. He stepped into the sitting room, coat damp from the rain, hair falling into his eyes. He looked at her with something raw simmering beneath the surface. Anger, fear, desire, and she froze. "Come here," he said, voice low, commanding. She obeyed without thinking, heart hammering in her chest. For a long moment, he didn't speak, just stood watching her. The room seemed smaller somehow, as if the air itself had thickened around them. "You shouldn't have gone into my room," he finally said. Not a scold, not exactly, but the words carried weight. I had to," she whispered. "I can't just pretend I don't care." For a heartbeat, he didn't respond. Then he closed the distance between them with that terrifying, deliberate calm he always carried. She could see it in the slight flare of his nostrils, the tightening of his jaw. He was at the edge of control. "You don't understand," he muttered, voice rough, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Being close to you, I can't be responsible for what happens next." Her pulse surged. "Then let me decide that," she said as she stepped closer in protest, voice shaking. "I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of this, whatever it is between us." He hesitated, gaze dropping to her lips. Every instinct screamed at him. He wanted to kiss her, to let the tension finally break, to lose himself in the moment. Their faces were inches apart. Her breath mingled with his. She could feel the heat radiating off him, the tension in every line of his body. But then he pulled back violently, as if remembering some invisible barrier, his expression hardening, the storm in his eyes locked behind that familiar wall. Amina's heart thudded painfully. Why do you keep pushing me away when all I want is—" "Because I can't protect you if I let myself forget," he snapped, then closed his eyes briefly, shaking off the tension. When he looked at her again, his face was calm, cold almost, but the heat in his eyes lingered. "You need to stay at a distance. That's the only way I can keep you safe." Her chest ached with frustration and longing. "You don't get to decide what I want, Jae-min." He didn't answer, only turned sharply and walked toward the stairs, leaving her rooted to the spot, trembling from anger, fear, and desire all at once. Later that night, Amina lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The memory of his face, the near kiss, the storm in his eyes made it impossible to sleep. Every sound from the house, a creak, a door closing, made her heart leap. And yet somewhere deep inside, she understood. His distance, his coldness, his restraint, it wasn't cruelty, it was protection. But if protection meant keeping him at arm's length, she realized she didn't know if she could survive that either. Amina had felt his absence all week. Jamin had been distant, cold, unreadable, disappearing between classes as if she weren't even there. At first, she tried to convince herself it was nothing, that his distance was simply part of his strange, intense life. But loneliness has a way of creeping in. By Thursday afternoon, she found herself laughing at something Daniel said in the student lounge, letting him help her with her notes for the upcoming project. It was innocent, friendly almost, and yet the small warmth it brought her made her heart ache for what she'd been missing with Jae-min. She didn't notice him at first. Then she caught sight of him across the room. His posture stiffened, dark eyes locked on her. His jaw tightened so sharply it looked painful. He didn't move immediately, just watched. And she could feel the heat in him, the tension that radiated like electricity across the room. Her chest tightened as he finally turned and left without a word. By the time she got back to the house, her heart was still racing, not from school, but from knowing how furious he must be. She barely had time to set down her bag before he appeared in the hall. "You've been spending a lot of time with him," he said quietly, but every word was sharp, controlled anger beneath the surface. I'm just trying not to be alone," she said, taking a cautious step back. "I don't understand why it matters to you." His eyes darkened, and he took a step toward her. "Because he isn't me, and you shouldn't—" His voice faltered, then hardened. "You shouldn't need anyone else." "I need someone," she snapped, emotions spilling over. "I've just been here, alone, for over a week, and you're nowhere. Do you know what that's like?" The room went silent. His chest heaved with a breath he didn't release. Then suddenly, he closed the space between them, hands gripping her arms, pulling her close, eyes searching hers like he might lose control if he didn't see them. "You don't understand," he murmured, voice low and rough. "Then help me understand," she shot back, tears threatening to spill. "Don't push me away and expect me to wait forever." His restraint snapped. In one fluid motion, he leaned down, capturing her lips in a kiss that was sudden, demanding, and everything she hadn't dared to hope for. Amina gasped, hands clutching his coat as the heat of him pressed into hers. Every second stretched impossibly long. The world shrank to just the two of them. When he pulled back slightly, just enough to look into her eyes, the intensity didn't fade. "I can't. Not yet," he whispered, lips brushing hers again, and a promise that spoke of more, of danger, of desire restrained by necessity. "I don't care," she breathed. His fingers tightened around her jaw, almost painfully, as he rested his forehead against hers. "You have to, for your own safety, for both of us." Her pulse thundered. "I can't stay away from you, Jae-min. Not anymore." He closed his eyes briefly, taking her in, every nerve screaming for the line he was trained to uphold. When he finally stepped back, the room felt suddenly too large, too cold, too empty. "I'll protect you," he said quietly, voice low, "even if it means keeping this locked away." She pressed her hand to her chest, still trembling. "You're insane." He smirked faintly, just enough to break some of the tension. "Maybe, but at least I'm yours, even if I pretend not to be." And for the first time, they both knew the line between restraint and surrender had blurred, and crossing it could change everything. The next morning, Amina walked through the university halls with a mixture of excitement and dread. She couldn't stop thinking about last night. The kiss, the whispered promises, the way his eyes had searched hers. Every memory made her pulse spike, And yet the memory also carried a warning. This wasn't just desire. It was danger wrapped in raw, unspoken rules. She didn't notice Daniel approaching until he was at her side. "You look different," he said casually, though his brow furrowed with curiosity. "I'm fine," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just tired." Daniel studied her for a moment longer, then let it go, though she caught the hesitation in his eyes. Across the hall, Jae-min appeared. His black blazer clung to his shoulders, posture perfect, expression muted. But the moment he saw her with Daniel, the faintest tightening at his jaw betrayed him. His hand flexed at his side. He didn't move immediately, just watched, searing his gaze into hers. Her chest tightened. She hadn't meant for him to see. She hadn't wanted to hurt him. Jaemin's lips pressed into a thin line. Then, as if remembering some unspoken command, he straightened, mask back in place. He walked past without a word, but Amina could feel the electricity left behind in the space where he'd been. Throughout class, she tried to focus on the lecture, but every glance toward the door reminded her he could appear at any moment. And every small interaction with Daniel now carried the weight of guilt, excitement, and confusion. After class, Daniel nudged her gently. "Hey, is everything okay between you and him?" Amina swallowed hard. It's complicated," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Daniel's brow furrowed, but he didn't press further.
Back at the Kang estate, the tension finally broke. Jae-min was waiting in the hall, eyes dark, hands clenched. "You don't get to do that," he said, voice low, dangerous. "Do what?" Amina shot back, stepping toward him. "Try to make me feel like I have no choice but to reach out to someone else?" "I don't care if he exists," Jae-min snapped, then immediately dropped his voice, low and rough. "I care about you. And every time I see you with him," he swallowed, "I almost lose control." Her pulse raced. "And what happens when you do?" His hand caught hers, thumb brushing her wrist, his gaze piercing. "You don't want to know." She leaned closer, heart in her throat. "Try me." The tension snapped as their lips met. Rough, hungry, desperate. The kiss carried all the longing and frustration of the day spent so close, yet apart. When they finally parted, breathless, his forehead rested against hers. This is dangerous," he whispered, hand sliding to her waist. "But I can't stop myself." "I don't want you to," she mouthed, pressing closer. He closed his eyes, fighting the storm raging inside him. "Then you have to promise you'll stay with me no matter what happens." "I promise," she breathed. And in that heated moment, they both understood. The line between protection and desire had dissolved. What came next could either save them or destroy them. The sun had already begun to sink behind the tall glass buildings of Seoul when Amina left campus. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of rain, that uneasy in-between moment when daylight lingers just long enough to make you believe you're safe. Her bag felt heavier than usual, and she couldn't shake the strange prickle running down her spine. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she was just tired. But when she passed the row of parked cars near the edge of the university's quiet side street, the sound of a door sliding open made her freeze. A black SUV idled near the curb, engine humming low. 2 men stepped out, one tall, one broad-shouldered. They didn't look like students. Amina's breath hitched. She turned, pretending not to notice them, but her pulse was thundering. The tall one called out in Korean, words she didn't quite understand, but whose tone made her stomach drop. "Miss Clarke, right? You should come with us." Her steps quickened. "I don't know you," she managed, voice unsteady. Before she could move another inch, a hand gripped her arm, rough, urgent. Panic surged. She twisted, tried to pull free, but the man's hold tightened. Then the screech of tires split the air. A black car swerved sharply, blocking the road, missing the men by inches. The driver's door flew open. Jae-min stepped out. Calm, cold, and terrifyingly composed, eyes sharp as razors. He didn't shout, he didn't run. He simply reached behind his back and flashed something metallic enough to catch the fading light. Whatever it was, knife or gun, the men froze instantly. "Back off," Jae-min said, his voice a deadly whisper that carried across the street. The 2 men hesitated for only a moment before retreating, muttering something under their breath as they slipped back into their SUV. The car sped off, tires screaming against asphalt. Amina stood frozen, her heart hammering so hard it hurt. Jae-min turned to her slowly, his expression dark with fury and something deeper, fear. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said, her voice trembling. "Who were they? What just happened?" He exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair, pacing once as though trying to leash whatever was burning behind his eyes. "You shouldn't have been walking alone," he muttered. "I told you. You were following me?" "Yes." He snapped, then his tone softened instantly. "Because I had a feeling something like this would happen." Amina swallowed, looking down at her shaking hands. You had a feeling?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the faint trace of his cologne, sharp and clean. "You're in my world now, Amina. That means you're a target." Her head spun. "Your world? What does that even mean, Jae-min?" He looked at her for a long silent moment. Then, instead of answering, he took her hand and led her toward his car. "Get in. I'll explain later." Something in his tone told her not to argue, so she did just as he said.
The city lights blurred past as they drove, her mind racing, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. He was still running on adrenaline, his jaw locked tight. "Jae-min," she said quietly after a long silence, "what would you have done if they didn't stop?" His eyes flicked towards her, haunted, protective, and unflinchingly honest. "You don't want to know." Amina's heart squeezed painfully, torn between fear and gratitude, dread and love. And though the car was silent, something had shifted between them. The fragile peace they'd built, now cracked with danger and truth. The ride back to the Kang estate was silent. Amina's hand shook slightly as she clutched her bag, eyes fixed on the window, refusing to meet Jae-min's gaze. The city passed in streaks of neon and shadow, reflecting the storm still raging inside her. Jae-min drove in silence, jaw tight, hands gripping the wheel.
Every muscle in his body was taut, coiled like a spring. When they reached the estate, he parked in the garage and didn't speak as he led her inside. The door closed behind them with a muted thud, shutting out the world, leaving only the two of them in the dim hallway. Finally, she turned to him. You scared me," she said, voice trembling, eyes wide. "I didn't let them take you," he said, voice low, almost growling, stepping closer so the distance between them vanished. "Do you understand? I won't let anyone touch you." Her pulse raced, heart hammering at the raw intensity in him. "I know," she whispered, her own hands reaching out to touch his arm. She turned towards the stairs. "Good night, Jae-min," she said with exhaustion pressing behind her eyes. The house was quiet, too quiet. Every shadow in the hallway felt like a reminder of the two men who had grabbed her, of Jaemin's car swerving to a stop, of the look in his eyes, fury and fear colliding into something she still couldn't name. She tried to sleep, lying beneath the heavy sheets, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw their faces, the rough hand on her arm, the flash of metal in Jaemin's grip, the sound of her own heartbeat too loud in the dark. Finally, she threw back the covers. Her bare feet touched the cold floor as she slipped quietly into the hallway. Light from the moon poured through the windows, silvering the walls. Her heart pounded as she stopped outside his room. For a moment she hesitated. What if he was angry she'd come? What if he was still furious at himself for letting it happen at all? But fear outweighed pride. She raised her hand and knocked softly. The door opened almost instantly. His hair slightly mussed, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Amina." His voice was low, careful. "I couldn't sleep. I keep seeing them. I didn't want to be alone." Something in his face changed. The hardness he usually wore slipped away. He stepped aside silently, letting her in. She stood near the edge of the room, unsure what to do with her hands, her breath shallow. I know I'm being silly," she murmured. "You're not," he said quietly. He reached out, brushing his fingers against her arm, a light, grounding touch. "Sit. You have every right to be shaken." The space between them seemed to hum. She looked up at him, the warmth in his eyes at odds with the dangerous calm he had shown earlier. "Thank you," she said softly, "for being there." He exhaled slowly. "I'll always be there." And for a moment, the room was filled with unspoken things. The tension between them, the ache of fear melting away with each pull of safety, and something more. Jae-min stood in the middle of the room, a few steps away, watching her. And she sat there, at the edge of the bed, her eyes piercing into him. "Do you have any idea what it's like to need you and know I can't give in?" His voice dropped, low and pensive. "Every second you're near me, I'm terrified something will happen, something I can't stop. Jae-min, I'm not afraid when I'm with you." Something flickered in his eyes, relief, desire, fear. "You have no idea what you're asking for," he murmured. "I do. I want this. I want you," she said, voice trembling. His restraint cracked. In one motion, he pulled her into his arms, pressing her against him. Their lips met in a kiss that was urgent, demanding, and electric. It wasn't gentle. It was fire and friction and everything they'd been denying each other. Every second stretched impossibly long. Amina's hand slid up to his neck, clutching him, pulling him closer, and he groaned low in his throat, a sound that made her chest tighten. When they finally parted, gasping for air, Jaemin's hands lingered on her waist, holding her as if letting go might shatter them both. We can't turn back now, he breathed, voice low and raw. I wouldn't want to, she whispered. He pressed his lips to hers again, this time slower, deeper. Their bodies glided together as if he became waves crashing against her shore. For the first time, neither of them cared about rules or danger or the world outside. All that mattered was the line they had crossed and the storm of desire and need that had no intention of letting them go.
Hey friends! Whoa, that was steamy. Should Amina stay in Korea or return to London before it's too late? Now make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's in store for this love story.